I think
Do we start?
I think this is live, right?
All right, is this live? Hello, welcome. Sorry, just figuring out the tech, doing really well. Hello, I'm Margot McGovern. I am the author of this book, Neverland, and also a member of the Love Oz YA committee. And I am here tonight with the great pleasure of launching Poppy Nwosu's new book, Taking Down Evelyn Tait, which you can see behind me here. So for those of you who don't know Poppy, she is an Adelaide-based YA author. Her debut novel, Making Friends with Alice Dyson, which I've also got here, was shortlisted for the 2018 Adelaide Festival Unpublished Manuscript Award and also for the 2019 Readings Young Adult Book Prize. Growing up in central North Queensland, Poppy enjoyed a thoroughly wild childhood surrounded by rainforest and cane fields, which sounds amazing. After studying music at university, she moved overseas to Ireland, where she spent 2 years exploring Europe. These days, Poppy and her husband still love to travel, but they also like to come home again to their house in Adelaide near the sea. Hi, Poppy. How are you?
Good. Hello, everybody. Hi, Margot.
So tonight we are going to run the launch as a Q&A. So I have a bunch of questions for Poppy about the book. And then we've also had a bunch of questions come through on Twitter throughout the week. So I'm going to be asking those. And then we have a giveaway as well for those people who have submitted questions to Poppy. And then if we have time, I'm going to throw it over to the live chat on YouTube and see if we have some questions for Poppy there as well, if that all sounds pretty good. So before we get started, I have just a couple of shout outs. So originally tonight, we were going to be launching this book at Dimmicks Adelaide with their YA book club, the YA Circle. Obviously, that plan had to change down with COVID. But I did just want to say a big shout out to Dimmicks Adelaide and to the YA Circle. They are huge supporters of the YA community in Adelaide, and they do so much to support local authors. So if you are tuning in from Adelaide, the shop is shut, but they are taking phone orders, and I believe there is a link on the OzAuthorsOnline page so that you can give them a call and get a copy of Poppy's book and any other books that you might need from them. So hi, Dimmicks Adelaide. But I guess the other shout out is, even though, you know, it sucks that we can't be doing this in person, I guess the sort of silver lining is that we are able to do it with everyone from all over Australia, which is hugely exciting. And that would not be possible without OzAuthorsOnline, who have just kind of rallied really quickly and created this amazing platform for book launches. So a huge thank you to, and I hope I'm going to remember everyone, to Wei, Anna, Alice, Danielle, Siobhan, and Jin for, I think that's everyone, getting that up and running. So moving on to this wonderful book. So Taking Down Evelyn Tait is such a warm and wonderful story about friendship and family and first love. And I had this wonderful experience reading it. I read it in the first week of isolation when everything was horrible and uncertain and just anxious and terrible. And this book was just this joyful place to go to in that horrible time. So I'm always going to have really fond memories of reading this.
That's so nice. Thank you.
So I guess first up, Poppy, can you tell us a bit about this wonderful book?
Sure. So for me, I guess I really wanted to write something with a similar feel to my first book, which is Making Friends with Alice Dyson. So I just wanted to write something positive and happy, which is kind of how I feel about my first book. And so it's set in the same school. It's kind of got, you know, if you've read both, there's a lot of the same side characters and teachers, but they're both standalones. But this book is about a girl called Lottie who is in high school, and she is just basically the worst troublemaker ever, a fact that she's pretty comfortable about. And but when her best friend begins dating her mortal enemy, Evelyn Tait, who is a bit of a good girl, Lottie decides to get revenge and beat Evelyn Tait at her own game, which is basically being good. So lots of crazy stuff happens after that.
It certainly does. It's such a fun story, and I'm really curious to hear where this story came from.
Yeah, I think like in a lot of ways it was like a direct reaction from the first one. Like I think Lottie was specifically like, I just wanted to write a different kind of protagonist because I get bored really easily. So I wanted to write something like fun and interesting for myself. So I knew that I wanted her to be really outgoing and really assertive. But the story itself, you know, I was driving, my husband was driving me to work and we were just chatting, like throwing back different ideas. And he actually came up with like, kind of like an elevator pitch, which was something like scumbag to class president in 30 days. So my original draft, the working title was literally like scumbag, which is so weird. And I had all these ideas at the start that it would be like each title would have like sort of. I knew that I wanted her to be really subtitle and would be like, you know, improving yourself and gaining this in 10 minutes. And then each chapter, like that chapter would be to cover 10 minutes a time, and the whole thing would cover 30 days.
Wow.
And that turned out to be way too hard for me to
say. That sounds extremely difficult and complicated.
It really was. It was way too ambitious. So I scrapped it. And the novel really changed a lot from what I think initially I thought it was going to be. So really that was my only real idea was that it would be about a girl trying to kind of pretend to be good. And then the rest of it sort of just kind of happened when I was writing it.
Excellent. This is not the question that I was planning to ask next, but it just occurred to me, because this is your second book, were you on a deadline to get that manuscript to your publisher, or?
I wasn't, no. So I actually wrote this before Making Friends with Alice Dyson came out. Alice came out in March 2019, and I wrote this book sort of towards the end of 2018.
Okay.
So it wasn't the second novel I've ever written, because I've written a lot of random manuscripts over the years.
I don't think you're alone there.
But it was the second, I guess, book that I kind of knew, or I hoped that I would have an audience. So it was the first time I'd ever written a book thinking that someone might actually read it.
Yeah.
that was like, it was a pretty kind of tough thing, actually. I had a lot of problems with it. I think it's that thing that so many authors talk about, you know, that second book. And although it wasn't under deadline or anything, no one even really knew I was writing it at that time. I had a lot of trouble, actually. It was really, really hard for me to write. And I think it's because even though my debut hadn't come out, I already like had it in my head that there was people that would read this new one. And so I kept trying to sort of write it in a particular way that I thought people would like, even though, you know, they're imaginary readers I didn't have at that point. So I was getting ahead of myself. But I think the fear of that really was quite crippling, actually. It was hard. So I got about 3/4 of the way through and basically just hit a roadblock, had to stop and go back to the beginning and kind of change things up and start again. Got there in the end.
Yeah, look, I know exactly how you feel. And just the idea that there is a readership out there, even if you haven't engaged with them yet, like just that added pressure. It's like you can't just do this by yourself in a room where no one's going to see it anymore. It's suddenly public.
It's such a scary experience. Like I think the pleasure of writing for me is, you know, I write for myself. I write the kind of books that I love to read. Like I'm an adult, but I love reading YA. So it's not exactly that I'm writing for my teenage self. I think I'm just sort of writing for my now self. That's not really what I was doing when I started writing this. It's like I was trying to write something I thought people would like. And by doing that, I wasn't really writing something that I liked, I suppose. So once I got over that, it was easy to write. It was so easy once I started doing it for myself.
It's certainly like it as a reader, it flows so well, and it feels not that it would have been easy to write, but it just flows so smoothly, and it's so enjoyable to read. Which brings me to my absolute favorite thing about the book, which is Lottie. I mean, she would have to be one of my favorite YA protagonists ever. Like, she just cannot go 2 minutes without getting herself in trouble, and she just has these, you know, sort of harebrained schemes that like she's just going to be good, and like just everything kind of goes wrong for her, and it's so much fun. And yeah, I was wondering if you could just share a bit more about her as a character and where she came from. And as you said before, like, she is the opposite to Alice Dyson, so it was really fun to read this new story from you that just has such a different character.
Yeah, she was really fun for me to write, like, and I think actually came quite easily to write her as well. And I think part of that, I've kind of noticed about myself that I really like writing about very assertive characters that really drive things forward. And I think that's because probably it's like a bit of wish fulfillment. Like, I'm not exactly like that in real life. So I get a lot of pleasure from being like, and then she wanted to say this, so she said it, you know, it's quite fun. But the actual, like, other than the idea that I knew I wanted her to be a bit out there just to make it more fun for me, at the time I was writing it, I was watching this English show, which is kind of like a YA show, but I think it's like, you know, really filthy language and stuff like that. So I think it's like R or something, but it was called Misfits. And it's basically, a bunch of delinquents in London who get superpowers, and it's all very silly. But there's a character in it, one of the main characters, this boy that I really liked, and he just says the worst things and does the worst things all the time. And yet, like, as a watcher, you really like him. Like, he's very charming. So it's like he gets away with everything. I just really had that in my head that I would love to do my own version, like a more YA toned down version of someone who's actually kind of awful a lot of the time, but is somehow very charming and lovable when they do it. That makes you like them anyway. So I think that was a bit of a challenge for me that I wanted to kind of set for myself for fun.
Excellent. Because, yeah, I think my favourite scenes in the book, some of them are the scenes between Lottie and her principal, who's like trying to pull her into line, and she's just so rude to him, but in quite an endearing way. And you do just really, you're cheering for her the whole time, even though you're like, the things she's trying to do, you're like, that's not going to work. But I kind of hope that it does for you. So, yeah, it's wonderful. And Lottie is supported by a wonderful cast of friends as well. So she has her two best friends, Jude and Grace, and then she has her enemy, Evelyn Tait. So I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about them and where they came from as well.
Well, for me, Evelyn Tait, like, as the enemy, really that only came about because I was like, so if there's this girl that is wanting to change herself and be good, like, why would she want to do that? So it had to be something to do with, there had to be some sort of arch enemy and some sort of reason. So that's really how Evelyn Tait kind of came to be. And I was much more focused on Lottie and who Lottie was, and then started figuring out kind of the plot around Evelyn. And then usually, sounds really terrible, but what I usually do when I write is I am an unashamed fan of romance. So for me, like, the romance is very central. Like, even if when you read the book, it might not be the main thing going on. Like, I think when I start thinking about a story in my head, it's very important. And that's really like the initial like frame. And then it's like I fit the plot and I fit the side characters around it. So it's interesting because I write a lot about friendship in both of my books and in this one as well. And yet, before I get started, I have no idea like about that part of the plot at all. And it sounds terrible, I'm probably even less interested in it than I am in the romance and all that stuff, which I spent, you know, ages thinking up and, you know, imagining scenes and stuff. And with the friendship, I'm like, I'll just figure that out as I go. It ends up being like a really big focus in the story. And I'm like, oh, that's weird.
I would say this book is very much about friendship and those connections, but there is a romance in it. And I think both your books have a romance in them. And I think something you do so well as a writer is you write first love and that experience of sort of falling for someone for the first time so well. There's just there's so much excitement and, you know, that innocence there, and I just love it. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about how you approach a romance, because I find romance really hard to write, and how you keep that tension going throughout as well.
yeah, I guess like I've noticed about myself, like over the years, all the stories that I like the most, like it's not necessarily that they're romance stories, but they're stories with a romantic element. I don't know, it's my thing, I suppose. I really love it. So, and I think because of that, I'm very drawn to, movies and books and things that have love lines in them. And I think through that sort of, just kind of being drawn to that, I've sort of learned about, if I'm reading a book, if they get together too quickly or something like that, and where that tension kind of ends, and I guess it sort of loses me a little bit. So this one, it was actually the reason that I was kind of hitting a roadblock when I was writing the first draft was because of the romance. And because I'm a fan of a lot of different romantic tropes, including the love triangle, which I know a lot of people really, dislike.
Oh, I love the love triangle.
Love it. If it's good, and I just kept coming back to it. I'm like, I really want to write, my version of a love triangle and try and, make those feelings real and how that would work. I really wanted to do it. And I was really scared. It was like I was having all this imagined kind of backlash that people wouldn't like it. It was really strange. And like I said, this is before I even had readers to like or dislike anything anyway. But and it was only really when I sort of went back to the beginning and I said, I really liked Lottie. Lottie just sort of came out the way she did. And it was just the romance that wasn't working because I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't that excited about it. I'm like, what am I even writing this book for if I don't like that element of the story? So yeah, I just kind of went back and I gave myself permission to write whatever I wanted. And part of that was, I guess, a love triangle, except that I really wanted to focus on the idea of, that unrequited crush where you're really, really obsessed with someone, but at the same time, you think you're in love, but you don't actually know them, they're just someone up on a pedestal. And I really wanted to sort of explore that kind of stuff with the romance in this.
Yeah, it comes across so well in the book. I was like, oh, I know that feeling. It's almost like when you're in love with a celebrity, or I remember, seeing people at uni and stuff, across the lecture hall, and you're like, oh, I think I'm in love with that person. I don't even know their name. And then if you'd actually spoken to them,
yeah,
might be there,
Fun thing about that whole first love kind of trope, it's, feelings are so intense, at that age, I suppose. And it's such a fun thing to explore, I think, in stories.
So one of the other things that comes across so strongly in both of your books is the Port Adelaide setting. And I love Port Adelaide, so I would love to hear more about that. But maybe first, for those who are tuning in who are not from Adelaide and don't know anything about the port, could you tell us a bit about what the port is, and then maybe why it forms such a integral part of your stories?
So basically, Port Adelaide is just one of the suburbs in Adelaide. It's very near to where I live. So that suburb and the few surrounding it are kind of my home neighborhood. And I'm not from Adelaide originally. And so I came here, and I think Adelaide, for me, it took a little while, but then it got under my skin. And particularly these neighborhoods, I just love it. And I think for me, it's about this kind of mix. I mean, there's all these old heritage buildings, but there's industrial stuff, and there's shiny McMansions and, empty shop fronts. So it's this really weird mishmash of, I don't know, just really different kind of area, I suppose, big cargo ships and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's so beautiful, but kind of in its own unique way, I suppose, because, I have to admit it can be a bit of a rough neighborhood as well, and particularly in the book, I really wanted to explore, less, I guess, exactly what it is. So I did a melding of, Port Adelaide 10 years ago when I first moved to Adelaide and lived here, and it was a lot dodgier back then. And now it's a lot more hip cafes and wine bars, but back then it wasn't like that. There was just these creepy old dodgy pubs filled with old guys, and you just be like, oh, I'm not even going in. So, and I kind of wanted to meld both of those versions of Port Adelaide into the book. And I think I'm much when I really find writing about place, setting, I guess, in a book, I find it really, really important for me. And I would never begin writing a manuscript without knowing, like, is it summer, is it winter, like, where's it set, how does it feel, is it humid, that kind of stuff. So it was really important for me to kind of get that setting across, but less about, you know, exact logistics, like this street here or how far it is. So I definitely take a lot of leeway, I suppose, with actual where things are set and stuff. And I use my imagination a bit. But for me, it's about expressing how I feel about that place through the way that I write about it. And I really, really love that. I think I would never start a book without sort of thinking exactly, you know, what that feeling is, that atmosphere, you know, that I want to get across.
Yeah. And I think I should probably say, I don't think you actually say in the book this is set in Port Adelaide, but I just was like, this is definitely Port Adelaide. But I love that it's kind of, it's your Port Adelaide, you know, or your port. And yeah, I totally get that kind of melding of what it was and what it's becoming. And yeah, it's wonderful. And sort of building on that sense of place, we're very lucky in South Australia that we have a very strong and supportive literary community. And I was wondering, since you've come to Adelaide, do you find that being part of that community changes or shapes your writing at all? And do you think there's anything about the YA that comes out of South Australia that sort of marks it as a bit different from any other kind of YA?
Gosh, definitely, like, with the community here has been amazing. Like, I think everyone really hugely supports each other, and that's like, you know, that's other authors and booksellers and book club people and readers, like librarians, everything. Like, it's actually really, really amazing. It's been really, really cool. And I think that's probably definitely definitely my publishing experience for sure, because I think also meeting authors that are in a similar situation as you, because, you know, being published can be very scary sometimes.
Yeah.
It's really nice to be able to talk to other people who understand that, especially because before you're published, you know, it's a complete dream. It's something you just want so badly. So it can be a little bit of a, like, it's such a positive thing, but it's still a bit of a reality check when it happens, with like how much anxiety you get over your book being out there. So it's nice to have that kind of supportive community. And I think because we're here in SA, we are a little bit further away from other places in Australia, and I'm sure it's particularly the same in WA. Like, I think the community really does kind of draw together like that. And I don't know if our YA is different, but there's a lot of really, really good YA coming from, you know, a pretty small area, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of going back to your writing a little bit now, you have a very, very strong authorial voice. So like you were saying, you wanted these two books to kind of connect, and I think they do in such a strong way. Like, even though you have very different protagonists in both books, I feel like I could pick up just like a blank manuscript without your name on it and be like, this is a Poppy book. So, and having that much strength in your voice is something that I know a lot of authors find really challenging, and it takes them a really long time to develop. So I was wondering if that's something you've had to work at, or if it's sort of just something that you've had.
Voice is such a hard thing, isn't it? Because I remember going to a workshop when I was first kind of, you know, trying to become published and stuff, and someone, you know, it's such a hard thing to even explain to someone what it is, and yet it is such a huge part of YA. Like, a YA book can be not YA because the voice isn't right, you know, but you can't really define exactly what it is or how to do it. And I don't know, like, I think I probably developed a style or voice over time, but I'm sure that isn't through like it just appearing. I think it must definitely be over years of working at it, because I know if I pick up my very first manuscript I ever wrote, which is awful, that it's awful, you know, and there isn't like a really good voice shining through or anything. So, but at the same time, I don't know how to kind of talk about how that stuff develops either. Yeah, I don't know. It's such a hard.
Sorry, that was a really difficult question.
It's a good question. I wish I had a good answer for you.
I guess that's why I'm curious, because it is one of those things that it is hard to talk about, but it is such an important part of being a writer, is having that identifiable voice, I guess.
So good.
Yeah. I've lost my place now in my question.
Wonderful job, Margot. Thank you.
So you, as well as being an author, since publishing your first book, you have now started working at Wakefield Press. So I was wondering what that's been like, kind of getting to see things from the other side of the table. And also if you have any advice for authors, published or unpublished, in like what do publishers want from us, and like what can we do to sort of help things along, I guess.
I guess it's been such an interesting and amazing experience for me. So I was working as an author, like with Wakefield for 2 years, I think, before, a job came up and I was just like, oh gosh, I want that so badly. So I work there part-time now. I got a job there at the end of last year. And it's been amazing. Like, for me, just in terms of now my day job reflects my main passion in life, which is books. And I get to work around books and get to work with people who care about books and art and the things that I care about. Has just been such a great experience. And it's also been, like, I guess, eye-opening in a lot of ways, because I think as an author, you can sometimes view publishing as, it's such a slow beast. It takes so long for things to happen. And like, as an author, you sort of sit around feeling like your book is the only book, because for you, it's the only book.
It is, yeah.
I went on the other side of the fence. So I work in marketing with Wakefield, and it just feels like there's so much work to do, and there's always more than you can do. And everyone there is so passionate about what they do, and they put in long hours, but at the same time, everyone are people and they need to go home to their families. And so there's only so much that you can ever do. And I think for me, it just feels the exact same as, like, as an author, when you're trying to self-promote and market, there's always more you could do than what you can, that you have time to. And I think for me, or maybe for aspiring authors, it's just that thing that, it's not some big, scary, shiny thing. It's just people, and it's just people who care about what they do and love what they do and are passionate about books, and everyone's just sort of trying their best. And I think maybe that's a really cool thing to remember, that there are people behind all that, and they're doing what they can to make it work, for you as an author as well. So I really love it. It's a great job. And I'm not just saying that because maybe people from
Wakefield are listening.
No, it's the best job I've had. It's wonderful. It's just so good to work with people that care about the things that I care about. It's very exciting.
Yeah. And this is kind of related. So obviously we are living in just a very strange period at the moment. And you are both an author who is releasing a book into this, sort of unknown, I guess. And you're also a publisher working in this time, working for a publishing house in this time. So I was wondering, like, what is it like for you at the moment? And also, how do you think this is going to change, or how do you hope this will change the publishing industry moving forward?
Well, I think in terms of how it's like, I think along with everyone else, I've had my complete freakouts. So basically, I think things started getting very serious here in Australia about a week before my book was about to come out.
Yeah.
And that was kind of that point where I realized things are changing, like, permanently. Like, I can't sit here and hope that by next week when my book comes out, that it's going to come out into a normal landscape. So I had a total freak out, and I kind of, the things I was worried about were that my book would come out and, there was so much, particularly at the beginning of all this, so much news, so much information on social media. And I just thought my book would just get engulfed, like it'll just sink. And I think that's what I was worried about, just how uncertain everything would be. And I kind of, before the book came out, I kind of came to, I guess, a peace with it, in terms of it will be whatever it is. Like, you have no control over that. But I kind of realized that, as an author, once the book is written and it's printed and it's coming out, like, it is always coming out in such an uncertain kind of situation. You never know how that's going to go, or if people are going to like it, or if people are even going to read it. So I kind of realized that a lot of my fears were the exact same fears that I before my debut came out into, like, a normal landscape. And, if I have another book out, I'll probably feel the exact same way. And I just kind of realized, like, yeah, it was an extreme version, but it's still that same uncertainty that I think all writers just experience all the time, where you just don't know what's going to happen or if it's going to go well. And in the end, like the week that the book came out was actually amazing. Like people were so nice. So many like bloggers and Instagrammers and everything online were just really, really cool and supportive. And like you guys at the Loveless YA committee and OzYA bloggers, and then just so many different authors. And I think for me, it was just such a great example of the Australian YA community and how much everyone like really pulled together. And I got so many opportunities to talk about my book or other people sharing about my book that I feel like was even more than kind of what might have happened if all this wasn't going on. Like, it was just all the opportunities that came up were really, really cool. And I guess in terms of how I, hope maybe things might be in the future, for me, like, obviously I want bookshops to come back. I want and all that kind of stuff. I want everything to go back to how it's been, and I want publishers to do well and not, have any problems with bringing new books out. But at the same time, like a platform like this, I think if you are from somewhere in Australia that isn't, Melbourne or close enough to Melbourne to get to Melbourne very easily, or East Coast, like, is so amazing. In the last month, I have attended multiple YA book launches and book talks for authors that I would never normally get to go to those. And I'm sure it's the exact same for you, Margot. Like,
yes.
So cool. And I think I kind of hope that, a platform like this, or the way everyone is online at the moment, kind of drawing together and supporting each other, I hope that continues. And I think that hopefully it will draw our, Australia is a big country and our cities are quite isolated. And I love the idea of us getting drawn a bit closer because of this really awful thing that's happened. And I hope that continues. I hope it becomes the norm for an author to do your in-store book launch, but also do an online one for all the readers that, you normally wouldn't be able to kind of talk to.
Yeah. It does kind of feel like we've all come closer. Like I was at Sarah Epstein's launch here a week or two ago, and just like being able to chat with everyone during the launch and sort of seeing people. And when we were talking with Wei, before this started, like I was too nervous to go and talk to Wei at Adelaide Writers Week in person this year. But now, we've chatted online and stuff. So it's kind of, I feel like it is drawing us closer in a way, which is, one good thing at least.
Well, if something awful is going to happen, it is wonderful if something, something can come out of it that isn't awful. That is a great, wonderful thing.
Yes. And sort of building on that, do you think what's happening now is going to change the kinds of stories that we're going to tell in the future? And is it affecting your writing at the moment?
Definitely has been affecting my writing, just like in terms of productivity. I feel like maybe I've hit my stride again in the last week, but that's only the last week, where I feel like I've finally sort of, and I think part of that, I was listening to a podcast and she was saying, part of it is accepting that things aren't going to go back to normal really quickly. So you can't kind of be like, oh, I just won't do it right now because things are so weird, and I'll wait till everything goes back and I can write in the way that I used to. And it kind of got to a point where I realized, well, if I do that, I might have to wait a really long time before I can kind of get into my projects again. And I always feel happier when I'm working on a creative writing project. Like it just makes me feel good. So I kind of need it. So I had to figure out a way to do it. And I think part of that's probably just creating a new routine. Like if your old one doesn't work anymore because things are so different, you've got to find what the new one is. So, and I think I've managed that now. So things are going a lot better. And I can't remember what the other half of your question was.
Do you think what's happening now is going to change the kinds of stories that we tell? Like, will it be possible to write, a story that doesn't in some way acknowledge this if you're writing contemporary?
I don't know. I've actually been thinking about that a lot as well, because, so many, even I can imagine how many I guess genre fiction will come out of people inspired by this in terms of even like sci-fi and horror and fantasy. But then it makes me think a lot about contemporary novels. You know, like so many contemporary novels are so of the here and now and include so much pop culture reference and real world reference. And you know, this is a huge thing.
You can't just kind of pretend it didn't happen.
Exactly. So I don't know. And I've been thinking about that too. And I'm like, because, you know, I've got other manuscripts they've been working on. And I'm like, so is that weird if they don't mention it? But I'm living through it right now. So I'm not that keen to like, for me, I'm more into escapism right now. And I'm less interested in delving deep into it. So such an interesting question, and I'm very interested to see what comes out of it in terms of fiction and stories.
Yeah, me too. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes. So can you share anything about what you're working on?
Well, yes, but like nothing like, you know, set in stone or anything like that, but I've got manuscripts that I am working on. So one light contemporary, kind of in the same sort of feel as my first two novels, which I'm very, very excited about. It's a bit of a road trip book. So we'll see how that goes. And then, a bit scary for me because it's a big departure from, I guess, the kind of fiction that people are getting used to me, you know, writing. And I actually I love reading all different types of YA. I love every single genre within YA, and I'm a very it makes me want to write every genre. And the reason that I write sort of light YA romantic stories, contemporaries, is because that happened to be the first book of mine that got published. And now that's what I do, but I don't know that that's what I only want to do. So yeah, I have a very dark book, which I'm very excited for. I guess it's okay to say I won a grant for it recently, and
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'm going to be mentored by Vicky Wakefield on it in kind of fixing some structural issues that I'm having. So I'm very, very excited about it, but also quite nervous because it's just very different from what anyone's read for me. So we'll see.
That sounds amazing. I'm excited to read it. And I guess this wasn't on my list, but I realized I should have put it on my list. What have you been reading lately that you've been enjoying?
Well, I'm just about to start Deepwater, Sarah Epstein. And I'm also in the middle of a book, which it's not YA, it's actually an adult book, but a friend of mine who's in my writing group, so I've read early versions of the manuscript and it's just come out, so it's just really exciting. So that's Inheritance of Secrets, which is an adult thriller. It's set in Adelaide and it's by Sonia Bates, so I'm really, really enjoying that. And I just finished the second book in the Valentine series by Jodie McAllister as well. And I'm about to start the third one after these ones. So that's really, really exciting.
I just finished the third one a few weeks ago. I love that series so much. I'm such a fangirl.
I'm obsessed. It's so good. I just it's really wonderful.
We can just turn this into a Jodie McAllister fan fest. So those are my main questions. Before we move on, should we just have a toast to Taking Down Evelyn Tait? Congratulations. It is a wonderful book and I'm so excited for everyone to read it. And yeah, congratulations.
Thank you so much for launching my book, Margot. I'm so appreciative that you said yes to this interview. Thank you.
Of course, this is so much fun. Alrighty, let me get up my questions from Twitter, and I'm going to apologize in advance if I mispronounce people's usernames because I have no idea. So, all right, so the first question comes from Ross Mrs. S, and I think her name is Sarah Ross. How much of you is in Lottie?
No. No, not in her personality at all. She was so much fun to write because she is, I wish I could be that brave about being just being out there in the same, although I wouldn't like to get into trouble as much as her, because I really shrink back from getting into trouble. So no, we're not really at all.
Fair enough. The second question comes from Kay Kerr, who is Please Don't Hug Me is coming out next week, I think. Yeah, with Text Publishing. So she says, how, Poppy, do you get into the headspace of your characters?
Well, probably from everything I've already said, everyone can tell that I'm a pantser, or as I like to call it, a discovery writer, because that sounds more sophisticated.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So in terms of like, I just have such a loose idea of what the main character will be. And I like to just get started, because if I do too much pre-thinking about their personality and character traits, I get bored and then I don't want to write about them anymore. So really writing from their point of view is how I just, as I make up more information, more character quirks, and more things that they like and don't like, I get to know them better and understand them. And yeah, that's really how I get into I guess I write into their headspace. And so often by the end of a book, I'll go back to the beginning, and by the end, you understand who that character is. So when you go back to the beginning, you're like, oh, they're just acting not the way that they should at all. It's a very interesting process, but for me, that's just how I have to do it, because I just have so many new shiny ideas that my whole thing is like forcing myself to finish the project first.
I don't think you're alone there. Next question is from This Girl Writes, and This Girl Writes asks, what was your favourite part of the publication process? Ooh, I like that question.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Definitely the moment that you are going to get published. It is like, that's a top moment.
That is a good moment.
So good. For me, the editing process, I know it might be different for some authors, but for me, it's always been such a positive experience. I feel like I learn a lot, but I also feel just like really grateful, I guess, because I can still remember so vividly wanting to be published so badly and trying to get people to read my manuscripts and how hard that was. And so I think it still feels very exciting that someone not only wants to read it, but wants to help me make it into a better story. So that's really wonderful. And my editor is Margot Lloyd at Wakefield, and she's really, really great to work with. So I love that process. And the other best part for me is that moment I hold the book in my hands. Like, you feel the weight of it, you flick it. It's just the best feeling. And I think because when the book actually comes out and it's in bookshops and all that kind of stuff, there is like a level of anxiety there that you don't necessarily expect what happens to you. And so it is a positive, wonderful thing, and you feel happy, but you also feel horrified and terrified, and you want people to read it, but you also don't want them to read it, but you'd rather they do read it. So it's just go round and round in your head. So for me, the moment where you hold the book, there's no pressure. There's no one watching you. It's just, that's, for me, I guess, my private moment of achievement. So that's how I think of that moment, and it's my favorite.
Yeah, like it's real, but it hasn't kind of been given over to readers just yet. That's a nice time. Yeah. Where are we up to? So I may be mispronouncing this. Wartenag says, my question as a teacher and YA reader and reviewer is, what would you, Poppy, like your reader to take away from reading your text?
Wow. So this is a really interesting question, because I will always have a few ideas of themes that I want to talk about in books, but that's more because it's something I'm thinking about and I want to explore for myself. But what I have had happen with my two books that have come out is, after they've gone through the editing and have gone off to the printers, is I sit down and I write the teacher notes. And that is such a surreal experience. Like, I'm reading my book thinking, what could somebody learn from this? And you will, like, I find so many things in there that I'm like, oh, that's a good lesson. But I would love to say I put it there on purpose, but so yeah, I feel like there is a lot of themes that I pick out of my stories afterwards. And for me, though, I guess in terms of lessons, I always think of YA particularly. Like, I wouldn't want to be teaching a lesson through YA, I suppose. I really love the idea of raising a topic or raising a question and kind of allowing a reader to maybe examine something from a different angle, like examine an idea from an angle that they might not always have come to it, but not necessarily give them, like an answer or a lesson or this is bad or this is good, but more just be like, what about this? Have you thought about this? And then just leave that open for them to kind of decide. And I guess when I think about my books, and I don't think it was on purpose, but I think it's because of stuff I care about, like in terms of themes, there's a lot of stuff about figuring yourself out and all those kind of coming of age themes and, the idea of not judging other people and getting to know people. And so very gentle sort of themes, I suppose, in terms of empathy is probably what I seem to enjoy to write about.
Wonderful. That's a great answer, I think. So our next question is from Belinda Grant, who I can't actually see. I can see the chats happening. I know she's been coming to things, so I assume she's here. All your characters are so believably teen. How do you get into that headspace?
What a question. That's a great question. I guess this is like such a hard thing. I feel like I should be, have all these really smart answers, but because I am just like, I'm such a make it up as I go. And I suppose for me, the aspect where it comes down to teen stuff is that coming of age. It's that idea that when you're young, and I think that's why I love writing YA, it's because the emotions are so heightened because these characters are experiencing these things for the very first times in their lives. They're not jaded. There's just so much to discover and learn about the world. And I really love writing about that stuff. And so I guess that's it in terms of teen voices. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know.
It's true. Like when I saw that question come through, I was like, yeah, because you really capture that feeling of what it is to be a teenager. Like when I read your books, I am just immediately transported back to being in high school and that feeling of just there is so much that's new to experience, and it's all like, how do I figure this out?
That's good, thank you. Yeah, I don't know why. I think they're just stories that I like, that kind of just coming of age themes, and yeah, first everything. It's interesting.
So our next question is from Camilla Reeds. What was your favourite part of writing your book?
So, as I said, unashamed romance fan here. I love writing the romantic relationships. I love figuring out how to slowly develop something so that hopefully by the time the characters kind of realize what's going on or get together, you feel like, that it's not insta love, I suppose. Like the opposite of insta love is my favorite. So I'm a big fan of the slow burn or, friends to lovers, all those kind of tropes. So that is always the most fun part for me. But I guess in this book as well, I just really enjoyed writing Lottie herself. And I particularly enjoyed writing all the conversations with her principal because they were easy. And I think I just always enjoy the parts of writing that are quite easy. So that one flowed for some reason. So yeah, that was good fun to write.
Excellent. So this is Books with Bree. Hi, Bree. Bree says, in what ways, if any, was writing Evelyn different from writing Alice? Was it easier or more challenging to write your second novel?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it was easier in some ways and more challenging in other ways. So it was kind of both. I think it was easier because, I'd worked with an editor. My first draft, I was able to make it cleaner before it even got to that stage. So I think in terms of writing skills, I just improved a lot. So that made it easier in terms of craft and, maybe story development and structure and stuff. But it was a lot harder because of that whole second book syndrome, just having these voices in my head kind of telling me I should be writing a certain thing instead of what I wanted. But to be honest, once I kind of figured that out and got over it, it was really easy and fun to write. Probably easier than the first one.
Okay, so the next question is from Tian's blurb. How or why did you decide to write contemporary YA? Oh my gosh, I'm losing my, my words. How or why did you decide to write contemporary YA? Was it a conscious decision on your part?
No. like I was saying, by the time Alice Dyson, Making Friends with Alice Dyson got picked up for publication, I think it was my 5th book or maybe my 6th that I had written. And by the time after I wrote it, it then got picked up for publication. I'd already written another 2. So I think I had like 7 or 8 manuscripts, and they're all quite different. You know, I've got really dark contemporary, all sorts of sci-fi everything. And Making Friends with Alice Dyson was my only kind of light, romantic, kind of coming of age contemporary like this one. And it just happened to be the one that got through the door. And, you know, obviously, I guess, you know, I really want to have a long career as an author. So I thought a lot about my second book, and I wanted to write something that would appeal then to the same readers of my first one. But I'm also aware that, you know, now people, I guess I'm a contemporary romantic coming of age story, which is interesting because it's not really a conscious thing. I think things just fell into place that way. And I'd really love to write everything, but also I'm aware that, you know, to be, I guess, successful as an author, it's very good to write something with a similar feeling that can appeal to the same people, so that you're not sort of trying to find a new audience every single time you bring out a book. So yeah, it's kind of a challenge. I'm very aware of these things, but also I want to write everything that I want to write as well.
Like, you can make that work. I think of like Jacqueline Moriarty, for example, who's kind of written everything.
Yeah.
But like you, I think what you guys have in common is you both have a really strong authorial voice. Like, I could pick up anything that she's written and I'd be like, I know that's Jacqueline's work, you know, because she just has that Jacqueline-ness, I guess, and you have this poppiness.
That's
and
very nice of you to say, because I love her work.
Amazing. But yeah, I think, you know, you can, not being in publishing, it kind of seems like you can move around a little bit, or you know, that's the hope.
Certainly in the long term, that's what I would aim to do. I mean, I love writing these kind of books, these light romance books. Like, I love it, and I always want to keep doing that, but it's just not all I want to do. I want to do everything.
Fair enough. Okay, so this is a question from Megan Meets World. When writing a contemporary story, how do you move the plot along without being too boring or too over-the-top dramatic? Really simple.
Well, in terms of over-the-top dramatic, I particularly like in contemporary, I think I'm really focused on asking that question, like, what would it really be like? And so I think my book does have some crazy moments, particularly like this new one. They go to a medieval fair and all sorts of weird stuff happens. So like, it's a little bit, you know, high energy, but I do try, I guess particularly in the relationships and the character development is where I want things to ring true. Like, I don't want them to be overly dramatic. And I think I really focus on that kind of emotional development, feeling grounded and feeling real. That's kind of what I care about. And then in terms of the plots, so I remember when I first wrote Making Friends with Alice Dyson, and my family were like, what's it about? And I was like, oh, nothing. It doesn't have a plot. And then I feel like my second book has a slight more of a plot, but I think sometimes with contemporaries, you know, your character's journey can be the point of the novel. You know, it can be what the novel is about, them changing and discovering themselves or falling in love or whatever. And, you know, I think plots are great, but probably in the type of books that I've written, I don't know if it's kind of even the main focus, I suppose, of the story. It's more for me, that character journey is actually the core of the book.
Yeah, I think, like, for me, those are often my favorite kind of stories, where it's maybe there's not, huge things happening, but the characters are going through big things internally, and that's what hooks your interest,
I love that as well. I find that so endlessly interesting for some reason. So yeah, I really enjoy writing those kind of stories.
So this is, oh no, not our last question. We've got a couple more to go. So this is from Magic Mala. Do you know who is going to fall for who when you start writing a romance? And have you ever had characters you write surprise you by going in a direction you didn't anticipate at the start?
No, I always know what's going to happen. So as a romance fan, I am a fan of particular romantic tropes, and therefore I guess I use those kind of things. So I've noticed about myself, like I'm never going to write a character that is sort of like a really rich shining prince character. I always go for the underdogs. So therefore, if there's an underdog in the book and like a shiny prince character, you kind of know where it's going to go. So I have very like particular romantic story tastes, and so I write to please myself, I guess. So I definitely know. I don't know anything else that's going to happen in the book, but I definitely know who's going to end up.
Who's getting together with who. Well, that's the important stuff sorted, really. So, so this is our final question from social media. So if people have questions that they want to put in the chat, start having a think now. So this last question that comes from Alice Boa Endicott, who is one of the Oz Authors Online amazing people that makes all of this happen. Her question is, and it's a good one, given that 60% of people who read YA are over 20, how do you balance writing a story about and for teenagers from which adults will still find takeaways?
That's a very good question. I guess, as an adult reader of YA, like I've already said, I write books for myself. So I think, and that has been something that I never really thought about until I got published, and my book was out there and I hadn't thought about that kind of stuff. And it was being read, and I got contacted by this really lovely reader who was 11, and, she said the most lovely things about my book. And after that, I was like, she's 11, like I started getting very nervous about the kind of things that I'm talking about, and whether, whether it is good for teens or not, or, it's stuff that I started really worrying about. But I think my process now, like particularly with my second book, is like first draft is what I want to write, and I give myself permission to do whatever. And then when I kind of go back into it, I do really think about those things, like to make sure that I'm happy with it. And I think particularly if you write romantic stories for teens, there's this balance with, there's a lot of romantic tropes that people love and that I love. They're not necessarily healthy things that you want to put into a novel that young women are going to read, that they're going to get strange ideas of, what a good relationship is. Yeah. And that's something that I think about a lot as well, like balancing something so that it still feels romantic and it leans into certain tropes that I like, but, that is a positive depiction of a love story and not something that is going to teach someone something awful.
Yeah.
A lot to think about, and it's something that I definitely do think about and struggle with, I think.
Yeah.
Question, no answer.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm just going to grab my other laptop here.
Yeah,
before we do hello, I just thought I'd come in as voice of God just because I like you love in the chat. Do we want to do the giveaway draw just so we have that?
Sorry.
No, just so we have that, because I know we've got a few interested parties in the audience. Let's do that.
So I've got that here. So the winner of the draw, and you can just so this one was via Instagram, I believe, this question. So this was Megan Meets World. So if Megan Meets World can just message me on Instagram address, and I will post out a copy of the book to you.
Wonderful. Congratulations, Megan. So we've got a few questions coming through here on the live chat. So Siobhan Plaza is asking, hey Siobhan, what is Poppy's ritual for writing? Anything she has to have to get her in the mood? Music, silence, tea, time of day, etc.?
I used to say, oh no, I don't need anything to get me into the right frame of mind, but it turns out I do, because the pandemic thing really, like, it spun me into a spiral and I couldn't do any work. So I've kind of rediscovered listening to music. It really helps me. And I used to, because my desk used to be set up in our lounge room, and I was write in the mornings, like before work. And, my husband would be getting ready and running around behind me. So I had to put my earphones on so I could concentrate. But last year, actually, we turned one of the rooms in our house into my own study. And because it's very quiet in there, I stopped using music as a way to concentrate. And I guess I thought I didn't need it, but, even though it's still quiet in my room, I think things are so loud in terms of just what's going on at the moment. So for me, it's only in the last week I started listening to music again, and it's just like this trigger of like work, do like deep dive into this kind of creative thing and forget about social media and forget about everything else. So I think that would be my one ritual now. And I just love listening to sort of instrumental kind of stuff. It's really, really good.
Excellent. Okay, hang on. I saw there was a question up here and I just need to scroll back up.
Moving.
Scrolling. Okay. This is from, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, and you'll see. How did you know you wanted to be a writer? Was there a specific moment?
That's a really good question. So I never knew that I've always been obsessed with stories. I've always loved movies and, reading my whole life, but it never occurred to me that I could be a writer, even though, I do know I did a bit of writing when I was young, but I just never thought about it. And I studied music at uni, so that's what I thought I wanted to do with my life. And I just never really put in the work to get it off the ground. And it was a really slow, sort of crushing thing for me to realize that I didn't love it enough to work hard enough at it to get anywhere with it. And so I kind of figured that out in my very, very early 20s, that it wasn't going to happen. And that was because of me, because I guess I just didn't love it. And I kind of thought that I didn't love anything in that sort of way for quite a few years. And I started writing for fun because I just felt very, I guess, creatively unsatisfied. I didn't really have anything to fulfill that part of me. So I started writing books just for fun, like just internet stuff, whatever. And then over the years, little by little, I just became obsessed with it. So there was no particular moment. There just became a point where I realized I wanted to do something with all these hours that I was spending writing stories, and I wanted people to be able to read them. And that kind of, I guess, led me to the quest of attempting to get published, which was, it took many, many, many years. And
really, it wasn't just like instant. Just
nothing instant.
End up with the first, pitch and
no. And I think for me, like, it was just about the fact that I was willing to work really, really, really hard at this. And no matter how many times I got rejected, which is a lot, I kept going anyway. So I think that was the difference when I kind of realized, with music, I never did that. Whereas with writing, I love it enough to fail at it so many times.
I love that. I love it enough to fail at it. That's, oh my gosh. I think that needs to like go on a wall somewhere as a quote, cross stitch it. I love that. We are getting some more questions coming through. This is from Little Miss Star. Do you ever think about what your characters do after you finish the novel? Like, how are Alice and Teddy?
Oh yeah, all the time. I don't think I'd ever write sequels, only because I don't want, like, what's a story without conflict? But I don't want those characters to go through conflict. They've gone through it all enough. They're happy now. They're just going to live their lives. But yeah, I think about it, definitely.
That's lovely. Who are your favorite authors? That's from Wayne Jones.
Oh, wow. So many. This is like one of those questions, as soon as you ask, I'm like, oh my gosh. I really love Juliet Marillier a lot. She does write some YA books. She just writes these very lush, romantic, beautiful books. I really love Vicky Wakefield as well. Her writing just, it's like writing goals kind of writing. It's so good. And as we mentioned, I've been fangirling a lot over Jodie McAllister lately, really obsessive. I really love Jake Kristoff as well. His stories are just exciting. And I also really love some overseas writers that I love, the Yangzi Chu. She did the Night Tiger and The Ghost Bride, which I think are beautiful books, and Ryan Groudon. So many. I'll stop there.
Let me just have a look through here. Hang on, I think I might be missing some. This is another one from Little Miss Star. Speaking of Jay Kristoff, would you ever collaborate with another author? Could you do an Illuminae?
I do not understand how collaborating works. I don't get it. I am fascinated by it, but I don't get it. And my first drafts is like, part of that process is writing something that might be embarrassing, but no one's going to read it, so it's okay. So I give myself permission to write something crazy, and I always know I can fix it up later before I let anyone. So how do you be that vulnerable with another author? And then how do you write something good if you don't let yourself be that vulnerable? So I'd love to, but also I don't understand how.
I feel a bit the same. Like it's, you'd have to show them the shitty first drafts that no one gets to see.
I'd love to. I think it's such an interesting thing. And when I see people collaborating like that and bringing out these cohesive, amazing stories that feel like they're just, one amazing story, I'm just like, amazing. I'd love to do that, but no idea how.
Yeah, fair enough. Have we got any more? I think I'm really sorry if I've missed anyone because the chat is going quite quickly.
I can just jump in. Hi, me again.
Hi.
If we have missed, don't forget that there is the opportunity for people to come into the Zoom room and ask their questions to you face to face or video to video. So if we have missed your question, we're sorry, but do join us for the chat for maybe about 20 minutes after the event. So if we want to officially wrap up, we can do that.
Well, I was going to say we've been going for over an hour, so
you guys have been so amazing.
We've proceedings and head into the private Zoom room.
All right.
So, Poppy, congratulations again. Taking Down Evelyn Tait, a brilliant book. Please, everyone, buy a copy from your local independent bookshop so that they can stay open through this. And congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Margot, for the interview, and thank you, Wei, and everyone else for hosting. I appreciate it so much, and thank you everyone who came and listened, and everyone who has supported my book. It's been amazing. Just the amount of support I've got has been really, really exciting. So I super, super appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.